Hey everybody, welcome back to the AAA Age Appropriate Advice for Sexual and Reproductive Health Advice. My name is Mandy and I'm one of the representatives of Ubushabami Futhi Yimilo. We are an organization that teaches about sexual and reproductive health, and we use what we call edutainment, so educational entertainment, to bring across the message of how to go about sexual and reproductive health conversations. Specifically with this segment, it's meant for parents. So the dilemma that we often find is that parents don't know how to start the conversation surrounding sexual and reproductive health with the different age groups. Therefore, we decided to come up with AAA, age-appropriate advice when it comes to sexual and reproductive health matters. So, have you taken a listen to our latest podcast? So this month's Parents of Ubusha podcast speaks about teenage pregnancy. It talks to a teen mom, so a mom who had a baby in her teenagehood, as well as a teen dad who also had a child during their teenagehood. And they both give their perspectives about how it was like being a teen in that space, how they handled the different circumstances, and what were the issues. So I want to first highlight what is happening in that podcast and encourage you to please check it out. It's available on all popular podcast platforms. Do find it under Ubushabami Podcasts. And then I will give 4 tips of what you need to speak about when it comes to this particular age group. So for today, we will be talking about the age group between 12 to 14. 12 to 14. So this is roughly grade 6, 7, and 8. So in the podcast, the juicy part is we find the teen mom who speaks about, how hard it was for her to be a teenager and be pregnant, and the stigma that comes with being pregnant as a young child. And also speaks about the importance of support that she received from her mother to go back to school. So for those of you who don't know, that is actually a big factor. Girls are known to drop out of school because of unplanned pregnancies. So when you have support that allows you to return to school, that is actually a big deal. So she spoke about that, and that was a positive light of some of the outcomes once teenage pregnancy occurs within a family. So having support is a big thing. Then we had our teen dad, who's also speaking about how he was also equally as nervous. And it's very important to highlight those things, because we tend to forget that sometimes there is a teen dad involved, and that is still a teenager who does not or is not ready and prepared for this new phase of their life. So he speaks about how he too was so nervous and anxious about what was going to happen, what needed to happen, what he needed to do and sort out with his family, because really this was his first encounter of such a situation, and he didn't know what he was going to say to his family, because he was then tasked, or he was now in first year of varsity, and he was there for school, not to make babies. So he too just mentions how anxious he was. And I think it's a very important one to always remember that anyone who is in the situation of teenage pregnancy or unplanned pregnancy, it is something that is unprepared for. Therefore, all facets of your life also take a toll and take a knock, and that's why there is an importance of support. It is one thing to highlight the obvious, which is to say this wasn't a good idea, or to say we wish the circumstances weren't like this. Yes, if you need to vent that out, go ahead and vent it out, but just remember, at the end of the day, these teens will need your support. If you find yourself in that situation right now where you are going to be a parent, you are a parent to a teenager who is either expecting, or a teenager who's expecting, whether a girl or a boy, your support is needed. Your support does not equal condoning of the behavior. Your support doesn't also equal, great allowance of what should happen. However, your support will help your child to be able to move forward from this phase. So I encourage that when this happens, if you can't bring yourself to see how you can best support without making it seem like without feeling like you have compromised your principles, I think you need intervention so that you can work through this as a family on how to go about it. Because these teen parents rather, now they are in the late 20s and 30s. When they reflect, I think the big thing that comes through is we had support. And that's what mattered at that moment. So that was about the podcast, but let's get to the juicy 4. So today's teen AAA age appropriate advice with regards to sexual and reproductive health is looking at age 12 to 14. So there are 4 things that we need to talk about when it comes to this age group range. And the first one is it is important to highlight reproductive systems, a male's reproductive system as well as a female's reproductive system. So as a parent, I think in the previous video, there was also a similar tip that we should talk about reproductive organs, that it is better if a woman does a reflection on reproductive organs with a girl child, and same applies with a male with a boy child for safety purposes. However, if you are a single-headed household and there's only one gender present, you can always ask relatives to come through to assist. But for practicality, in terms of just the biological understanding, meaning you're just teaching with pictures, this and that, not pointing at yourself, then by all means, any parent can do it. So we must speak about the reproductive system so that your child understands what will actually happen if and when they have sexual debut. It is important for you to be practical, it is important for you to be honest, and it is important for you to also do some learning on your own. Do you actually know what are the structures inside, the internal organs? What are the channels that even lead to the internal organs? I've heard people come through and say, yeah, this is my vagina. Your vagina is not visible on the outside. It is the canal that leads up. That's your vagina. What's on the outside is your vulva, your mons pubis, your labia majora, labia minora, But you don't have to use those words when you talk to your 12-year-old. But it's to make it fun to say, maybe let's draw a picture. What do you think is inside of you? Then you will have a fun time discovering what wild imaginations your children have. They could put an entire heart where the uterus can be. And I think that's fair. If you think heartbeats are down there, hey, who are we to say anything? But it's a fun way to ease into the conversation. It's a fun way to also practically play into the conversation. So draw what you think is down there for a girl and for a boy. And you'll be pleasantly surprised that they actually do know what is down there. Because either they've learned it at school, seen it on social media, or they've seen it on TV somewhere. So once those things are out and they've shown you what they know, then you know exactly where to start. So then you can say, oh, you've drawn a long structure. You've drawn a stick. What is the name of that stick? Can you label it for me? And sometimes they can. They can say, no, that's the penis. Or they can use an informal word for it. But whatever they use, it starts the dialogue. And then once you have all the structures, then it is fair and good for you to then briefly explain what each structure is for. And remember, when you have this engagement, you must allow your child to also guide the conversation, because you may find that they have more knowledge than you do. I recently saw this TikTok, and I am assuming this child is 9 or 10, and literally was telling his mom how he knows that we were all girls before we became boys because of our XX chromosome. And then we lose the X at some point and it becomes a Y, so we become a boy. And wow, that's like high school biology. But they're already learning these things. So you can be impressed. You can, praise them and have a moment with them. And the more you allow your child to be comfortable with the conversation, the easier it is for you to also ask more sensitive and intricate things. So try that. But the reproductive systems, male and female, needs to be highlighted. It doesn't have to be grand detail. It doesn't have to be hard science, but it needs to be what is true and factual. We are for fact-based, because there's no point in you drawing a unicorn and teaching them about unicorns when you know very well there are no unicorns in the pubic area. Sorry to burst your bubble. So anyways, moving on. The second one that they speak about is, at this age, it is also important for you to teach your child about effective decision making. So effective decision making, and it's important because it ties in with the third point. But effective decision making teaches them to also set their boundaries. So they must be able to have the yes be yes and no be no. I'm not saying it has to always be like that and they can never be unsure because they always know. Even you as an adult struggles to make decisions. But they say speak to your child about how to make active decisions. The reason why this tip is given is primarily because moving into these life phases, 12, 13, 14, it is a chunk of a child's life where peer approval is very big. So when peer approval is very big and it finds a child who does not know where they stand, does not have their own personal stance, or is still figuring out what their personal stance is, it means they go with the wind and they go with anything and everything. So that means if you are pressured to smoke, you will go for it. If you're pressured to drink, you'll go for it. If you are pushed and pressured to allow me to have sex with you, children will go with that, because I want to please my peers and I want to seem cool, and I don't have an alternative that I've formalized for myself that I thought was good for me. So that's why it's important for you to teach them effective decision making. So simple things is tasks even at home, that you have a choice. There are chores that need to be done. It's either you wash the dishes or you wash the car. You can pick which one you want to do. Either way, the chore is being done. However, they pick their preference. And in that way, they also realize that they always have choice. They have the liberty to choose what they need to do. You don't remove them from responsibility, or you don't remove them also from tasks needing to be done, because you will encounter anything in life. So you must not give your child a false perception of what reality is. The reality is they will be faced with these decisions on a daily basis, whether from friends, strangers, or even on television, what they watch, what appears in front of them, or on socials. So when that decision comes, what have I been taught at home? Do I know that I have every right to decide, I'm scrolling past this is unsafe, I'm not going to watch that, that's not for me, not for my age group. I see they started off kissing, but now clothes are off and I can see more than what I am comfortable with. So I have a choice to say, no, I'm not watching this. So decision making is important, and it's in basic and practical things that you can teach this. So this is important and leads us to our third point, which is consent. It is important for you to talk to your children at age 12 to 14 about consent. At this age, they can grasp, they can think, they can reason. So speak to them and start having the understanding of what does it actually mean to get consent. One tool that we use a lot at Ubushabami is we use Amaze videos. So check out amaze.org. They have animation videos and they teach different topics with regards to sexual and reproductive health. You can find a helpful video there with regards to consent. It explains with animations or pictures what is consent. And it's in simple wording so that it's easy for your child to understand, and also for you to then carry the conversation further. As short videos, nothing more than 5 minutes. So the point is, teaching and having the conversation about consent will also be a safety mechanism. I think we said this in previous videos, that it safeguards the child to know when things are unsafe for them. So teaching them that you need to ask for permission before you do something to somebody else. So consent is dual. It's you knowing that you have the power to do anything and everything, but respecting another person, that they too have the power to say yes or no. So teaching them that life has that duality is a very important one, and it's very, very important when it comes to sexual and reproductive health. And starting it now at this age group range is perfect, because when they move further into the later teens with this understanding, it will help our teenagers interact and engage with each other in a more healthier way. So it is good for us to have the conversation early rather than later. So finally, they say, especially when we're looking at our 13, 14-year-olds, start to expose them to the understanding of what are birth control methods available out there. I know this is a very uncomfortable ask or tip, and I gather that sometimes the hesitation from that is, I've seen and I've heard some parents say, once I start exposing certain things, am I not suggesting? And my understanding and response to that is, matters that have to do with our sexual and reproductive health need to be made normal, organic, natural. There is no shame in your genital parts. There is no shame in your internal reproductive organs. There is no shame in puberty. There is no shame in sexual feelings. There is no shame in, reproductive processes. There is no shame. It's part and parcel of life. I do agree there are extremes that surround us, and there are also extremes in how things are introduced to our children, which is why we gather and try and learn how to do it more effectively, safely, and appropriately for what the child needs. So when we have that on lock, we then gradually introduce our children as well to this very natural part of life and process. So when they say teach about birth control, you don't have to go through the entire spectrum, especially when children aren't or have not been introduced to the understanding of how sexual intercourse works. You don't have to go there. So the starting stages of birth control is, you can start with the simple one. Abstaining. What does it mean to abstain? What does it mean to maintain maybe your virginity? Having conversations about that is what is appropriate for this age group. And it helps your child to also then, once they jump into the high school phase where they're going to be faced with other age groups that are exposed and experienced in other things, that they too can have a better understanding of why is it they are not engaging in certain things compared to other children in different age ranges. So the advice is, start having the conversation about, there are natural things that will happen once we start to do certain things. So the reason why we do not engage in them is it is not our time. Our body is not ready for that. Our minds are not ready for that. Emotionally, we too are not ready for that type of responsibility. So that's why we stay away from it. Little things that come up or start that engagement will happen as the different age groups go by. So be realistic. What I mean by that is to say, at some point in high school, you may find that your child may start kissing their partner. Your child may hug their partner, and it might have even happened at the primary stage. So even with that understanding, it's letting them know that if they feel a little buzz or some type of way when they do that, that is normal, but that can also be a strong urge later on when they do something like that, because now they're growing, and that can lead to them feeling some type of way, and it will, one thing leads to another. So there are reasons why we don't go kiss each other in private rooms where no one can see us, because one thing can lead to another. There is a reason why we say, if you have someone that you love, you can hug them, you don't have to kiss them. There is a reason why we say these things, because some things will overpower you. Not because you're weak, but because they're just strong feelings and you are maybe not mature enough to make the decision about what to do with that strong feeling. So I think the more I keep speaking about this, the more I see how there are many ways of making this very practical and individualize it to yourself and to the child that you are teaching. But my advice above and beyond is allow yourself to be open, allow yourself to be honest, and allow yourself to be creative in how you teach your children about fundamental things about life. If you don't teach them, no one else will. And the world is not patient to teach others. You are the custodian to teach them all these great lessons. So all the best with your 12 to 14-year-olds. Take care, parents. Ababusha.